Three Things with JR is back. You know, it's more often I find myself when I'm listening to my band's recordings and I'm listening to my drumming, because that's all I really pay attention to when I'm listening to our songs. More often than not, I can't say I'm thoroughly impressed with how great a drummer I am. However, on that song, the Three Things with JR theme song, a brand new The Band Big song called Brand New Day, on that song, I'm very impressed. I am proud of the drumming I did on that song. It's easily the most complex, the most intricate, the fastest, most powerful drumming I have recorded to date. And I've recorded several albums now, both with either two with Icehouse Road and a full album with Big, and then some now. And this has been the best drumming I've done. So you're hearing a little tidbit of that song here as the theme music for this show, and it just gets me pumped up to do this show every time I hear it. It's the kind of drum solo where I want to beat on my desk, just kind of like Money for Nothing has a good drum solo like that. In the Air Tonight, obviously classic. Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. So those are three drum solos I think about that. I think a lot of people, when you hear them, you can't help but bang on your desk doing your own home version of the drum solo. And I do that with my own drum solo now, and that's pretty freaking cool to me. And I hope others find it the same, because it was a lot of fun to do. All right. What are we doing this week? What is happening in episode number 49? Well, first, let's talk about last week's episode number 48, Science, with Tony LaRocco from Pale Blue Dot. This was the second episode in which I called somebody off of my friends list on Facebook without any kind of heads up or warning or anything. They had no idea why I was calling him. The first week I did this with Abdullah Justania, a comedian friend of mine. This last episode was with Tony, a former musician, co-musician. We were in the same band together for a little while. And in both cases, they picked up having no idea that I was recording and that I was about to put them on a podcast. And they both rose to the occasion, and man, it was a lot of fun, and it is what I'm going to continue doing on this show for the foreseeable future. I've got a couple interviews already recorded. The one I'm going to play for you tonight is awesome. I did want to mention that in last week's episode, for those of you that listened to it, you might have been wondering what all those extra noises were, and I do want to explain that it was not your computer making those noises, it was mine. Because I have the browser open on Facebook, I was trying to call people, and then they didn't answer, and finally someone answered, and it was Tony, and I was talking to him, and while Tony was saying something, somebody else on Facebook started messaging me or calling me to say, hey, what did you want? I'm just calling you back. And I couldn't make it stop quick enough. So those noises were just happening while Tony was talking, so I couldn't really edit them out without losing big chunks of what Tony had to say. So those were Facebook Messenger alert noises on my computer, and I couldn't make them go away. I should have explained that before we played the interview. So if you ever go back and listen to episode number 48, just know Facebook Messenger noises a couple times appear throughout that interview. So nothing to worry about. We did a bonus episode this last week. I was on a show last Tuesday called Do You Believe with comedian Chris Allen and his sister, in which we talked about my spiritual journey, and more accurately, my journey that ends up with no spiritualism whatsoever. And if you want to hear that, I did record the entire show, the audio only, and that was the bonus episode that came out between episode 48 and this episode 49. So that's there. Whether you care or not, doesn't matter. It's there either way. So tonight, we do have another guest. And I say tonight because it's 10 o'clock on Sunday night as I'm talking into this microphone. And I am excited for you to get to hear my special guest this week. I called my cousin Sarah, which, you know, if you don't know my cousin Sarah, you might think, great, he's just calling people in his family and talking to them. Who's interested in that? Well, everybody should be interested in this one because my cousin Sarah is a badass. She is from Ohio originally. She's multilingual. She has lived in several countries. She lived in New York City for several years, currently lives in upstate New York with her husband, Brian, and recently went on a work adventure to Indonesia. Yeah, and not Bali, not the really touristy fun part of Indonesia that you all would like to go to, but the part of Indonesia where no tourist goes. That's where she and her husband went. The plan was to be there for 10 months. That plan got derailed, and she did something almost as cool to get home from Indonesia. So I'm not going to spoil any more than that. Just know that you are going to listen to someone who went on a pretty great adventure. And I am jealous, and I hadn't spoken with her since this all happened about a year ago. So I was really excited to be able to finally talk to her first person and get the whole scoop on exactly what all happened with her adventure, cut short by the pandemic. But she did not let that make it any less adventurous. So that's coming up here in just a minute. Sarah Ford will be the guest on the show tonight. And before that, I figured I'd go ahead and give you 3 things of my own. Just 3 quick ones here, just some quickies. So my own 3 things, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll be back with Sarah.
Thing number 1.
Today, I am recording this on the day we set our clocks ahead an hour for daylight saving time. And I couldn't be happier. I am not a morning person. I don't care if it's light or dark. In the morning, I want it to be light out in the evening so I can go do stuff that requires light after work. It sucks to get off of work at 5 o'clock and it's already dark like it is in the middle of the winter in December. It just sucks. I want to get out of work and have at least an hour, if not 3 or 4 hours, to go do whatever it is I want to do, which these days is just disc golf. So, but there you go. I love daylight savings time. I don't care about losing an hour of sleep. I sleep in anyway, so I'm pretty confident I'm getting the hour and all of the sleep I need. So I couldn't care less. And plus, I'll get it back when daylight saving time ends in November. So it's fine. So daylight savings time is now. It has started, and I am already loving it.
Thing number 2.
Washington, a life. As I've mentioned before, I've been listening to books on audible.com, on my Audible app, on my car, and it has taken over my life. I've listened to about 10 books on there now, several thriller, crime novels, stuff like that, as well as some biography type stuff. I've listened to President Obama's new book on it. And currently, I am in the middle of the George Washington biography by Ron Chernow, the same guy who wrote the Hamilton biography that Hamilton is based on. And it's interesting to me because I'm in the part of the book that's right at this exact moment. I'm towards the end of the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Yorktown, things like that. And so these last several chapters, hours of time, there have been so many times where I'm hearing the words used in the book, and I'm hearing like what must have been moments of inspiration for Lin-Manuel Miranda when writing Hamilton, because I think there's just as much influence on the Broadway show Hamilton by this book as there is by Ron Chernow's biography of actual Alexander Hamilton. There's just so many words that are used that I can just imagine Lin-Manuel Miranda just hearing words and going, yep, that word's going to go somewhere in this show. It rhymes. It sounds cool. It's not a word you hear every day. It's because a lot of it's in this Old English. There are quotes from letters George Washington wrote, letters that Hamilton wrote for George Washington, and others wrote about. I mean, it's just, there's so many things in there. You're like, oh, that's where Lin-Manuel Miranda got that part of Hamilton. Like, there it is. It's just so much fun to listen to. I highly recommend it. It is a long book. I'm not even halfway through it. I'm at that part of George Washington's life. He's 49 years old. The Revolutionary War is about to end, and there's still 21 and a half hours of this book left to listen to. So I'm pretty excited, and I'm learning quite a bit, and I'm absolutely loving it.
Thing number 3.
First world problems. I write these things down in my notes tab on my phone quite frequently, and I just thought I'd give you an example of a first world problem. Like, first world problems are ridiculous, right? They're ridiculous because if you were in the third world and somebody was complaining about this, you would roll your eyes, you would be disgusted, you might not even fully understand it because it's just not a problem you can relate to if you're actually struggling with the difficulties of the basics of life, right? But first world problems, and that's the kind of the point here, is to overindulge in the, maybe it's sarcasm, I don't know, but let's just complain about our first world problems. For example, when I get out of the normal rhythm of my life, like let's say I had to take a trip recently to Iowa to see my dad. It wasn't exactly a vacation, right? But it wasn't my normal life of getting up and going to work, playing disc golf, watching TV and going to bed. Like, that's my normal life. In my normal life, it's a rhythm. It's the same. It's very much the same most days. But when you go on a vacation or a trip or get out of the rhythm of your life, it's really hard to keep my Apple Watch charged. Like, I struggle with this. There's oftentimes I'm like, I do not have enough battery to track all my steps on this walk wherever I am, on the beach, on a boardwalk, in the woods, going hiking, I don't know, wherever I am. I'm on vacation and I can't keep my Apple Watch charged. And that, for me, it's a really annoying problem. It might be the worst thing of my life right now. And that is a pure example of a first world problem that I should be embarrassed to have that problem. One, I should have the resources to fix that and never have that problem. And two, it's just kind of, well, I don't know. It's not exactly garnering sympathy for me, I don't think. Nope, it's just an example of the kind of problems I have. So there you go. That's three things with JR officially done. We're going to do a quick break. We'll be right back with my surprise talk with my cousin Sarah, right after a drum solo.
Hello.
Hello, Sarah. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you, Adam?
I'm good. Hey, for the purposes of this call, can you call me JR?
Sure, JR. How are you?
I'm good. So the reason I'm calling, I don't know if you've been paying any attention to my podcast or not.
Not in detail, but it's on my radar.
Yeah?
If that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I remember it being mentioned and I've been wanting to get back to it. Yeah.
Cool.
Tell me more.
Well, so what I did last week for the first time, I had this harebrained idea that I was just going to randomly call people on my friends list on Facebook and see who answers and see who wants to talk and let me record it and put it on my podcast.
This is cool. I'm intrigued.
So I should tell you right now, I'm recording this, and I'm hoping you'll agree that we should put this on the podcast.
Well, okay, I'm going to agree. It's a leap of faith because I'm not sure exactly what's coming next.
I
but
mean,
sure.
I'm not gonna throw you any hardball questions or any gotcha situations. The whole idea here is, and you're the third one that I've done now. I did one last week. I did one about an hour ago, and you're the third person that I've actually made contact with. Because believe it or not, when you just randomly call somebody on Facebook Messenger, most people don't answer so far. They're like,
I
"What
believe
is?"
it. I actually, like, he must have butt dialed me. He's not me. He doesn't really mean to call me right now.
Yeah. Yeah, people think it's a mistake.
Yeah, interesting.
We're gonna fix that over the coming weeks because this is, for me, it's been a ton of fun catching up with people that I have not been able to catch up with in a long time for all sorts of reasons, whether it be the pandemic or geography or whatever. I figured let's just talk, and that might be interesting to people, especially since the people I'm talking to are interesting, such as yourself.
I'm very honored to be included in this.
Awesome.
I have to say. So
That's cool. So what's going on? I tried to connect with you an hour or so ago, and you were in the middle of some big Zoom presentation. Can you talk about it? What were you a part of? What were you doing?
sure, yeah. So technically, I didn't actually answer the phone when you called.
That's right.
Because I've been so after months of like having no employment, basically like through the summer. I mean, very, very little. I mean, I was washing windows with my mom's friends to like make a little bit of extra money after we got back from abroad. That's a whole nother story. But then suddenly, within the last couple months, the tables have totally turned and things have landed in my lap, and it's been exciting and busy. And I'm now doing a virtual fellowship, so it's like the fellowship I did in person in Indonesia, except now I'm doing everything from the comfort of my home here in New York, like mostly at my dining room table or like just standing at my computer. And I'm working with this university in Surabaya. And so tonight's meeting was this big info session for all of the graduate students who are interested in taking these English workshops that I'm going to help provide to support their English or graduate studies. It's very specific, I realize, and kind of wordy to explain.
So
that's what I was doing.
what I know about what you do, and you're going to correct me with anything that I say wrong here, is you, in the past anyway, have taught people who come from other countries who are living in America maybe actually how to speak English as well as how to live in America. Is that anything close to what you actually do?
Yeah, I'd say that's part of it. So like I've taught in the US and I've taught abroad, and it's slightly different in those two contexts. Like when you're teaching in the US, it's people that are here for whatever reason, and they're trying to figure out how to survive or how to hopefully thrive. And so part of that is just the, sometimes the basic things like, how do you go about this? How do you go about that? Are you doing okay? And abroad, it's like a whole different thing. Like they're trying to learn English for, a multitude of reasons, but partly because English is the language to succeed in in a global context. And but they don't have access to it. So like when I was in Indonesia, for example, recently, I was hot stuff in my little town. I mean, I was the celebrity because everybody wanted to know the American. It was really crazy. But they don't necessarily have access to a native speaker is what I'd be called. So
so the last time we connected was at your house in New York. My friend Darren and I were on a 4-day motorcycle trip, and you graciously allowed us to hang at your place, and you dropped the bomb on us. Like you hadn't really made this public yet at the time, was that you and your hubby Brian were about to go abroad to Indonesia, and this was kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah, I remember that moment because I remember I said, yeah, we have an announcement, and was a little bit worried because when you say that, people think you're going to have a baby,
That's exactly
which
what
we
I
were
thought.
not.
Yes.
Yeah, we did not have a baby, but we did have a wild international experience, that's for sure.
And you went there when? Like, what was the? Give me a time frame for when you went to Indonesia.
So the fellowship that I got, I think it started exactly on September 1st. So we left something like August 27th or 28th. So we got like a day to like recover from jet lag before we kind of had to
And this would have been
start
2019, to
functioning.
be clear.
Yes, exactly.
Back
2019.
back when the world was screwed up in other ways, but not in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely correct. I would agree with that 100%.
And you guys like up and left your lives in New York, right? Like you rented your house out, somebody else was living there, and you just totally were all in on Indonesia.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, it's kind of in some ways it's easy to do when you know it's temporary. We knew we
Yeah.
had 10 months and this is what we were doing, and it was a chance to travel and have a lot of it paid for. Not completely, but a lot of it. And we knew we wanted to travel, so this was just something we kind of always wanted to do.
Yeah.
So off we went.
And so you clearly had work to do while you were there. Brian, if I remember correctly, did not have like any kind of work lined up, and I think he was looking forward to doing some exploring. Or what did he end up doing?
Oh, that's a great question because we were naive, very naive.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, big time. Like we thought that would be easy to make happen. Like maybe he could do some volunteer things. Maybe he could just like hike around. We were going to be on this tropical island. It wasn't like a big metropolis by a long shot. So we
Hmm.
thought, oh, great, he can like hike around. Um, it was so hard living there.
Hmm.
Like no, like okay, well, I'll start with the most obvious part that I mentioned before. Like we stood out like you wouldn't believe, and I could barely walk across the college campus without people staring at me. Without like I had strangers come up and ask for a selfie with me,
Hmm.
and it really kind of made us not excited about going out because we could never just go out and do normal things because we weren't normal people.
You guys were
So that was
living the lives of celebrities.
we actually came home one day in a taxi and like the neighborhood kids saw Brian in the taxi and just started cheering. So we literally had like kids cheering when we came home.
You know, as I
It was
think about it,
strange. Yeah.
I know plenty of people travel around. I don't hear anybody except for you say, I'm going to Indonesia. So maybe it shouldn't be a shock to me that the people in Indonesia don't see a lot of Americans. It's not exactly the most popular destination for Americans to travel abroad to. So yeah, I guess that makes
Especially
sense.
the place that we were. Yeah, I mean, like a lot of people love the idea of going to Bali, but Bali is it's part of Indonesia, but it's a very um, tourist centered. Like they're not fazed by foreigners in
Yeah.
Bali.
I,
I mean,
I,
if you look for
go ahead.
Ambon, Indonesia, it's like it almost looks like there's nothing there except ocean. You have to kind of like zoom in on Google Maps to find it. Not a lot of people really spend time there.
And what was the name of the actual town or place that you were in Indonesia?
Uh, Ambon, Ambon, and
Okay.
it's part of the Maluku Island region. So it's like pretty far east if you're looking at Indonesia. I mean, Indonesia is huge. It's really long, like tons of islands, and we weren't actually that far away from Darwin, Australia.
Oh,
Um, yeah. So if you see Darwin, Australia, in the northern part of Australia, we weren't. I mean, relatively speaking, we were not that far away
so you
from that
were
area.
south of the equator?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, for the first time ever. Yeah.
that's pretty
So
awesome.
that was yeah, I mean it was great. I mean it was interesting. It was the first time I'd actually lived in a tropical place. I've lived in a lot of places, but they all had seasons just like where I grew up. It's hard to keep track of time when you don't have a season to mark it, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
I kept thinking it was still September, like many months later, because
Right.
that's when we left the United States, and I thought it was still the same and just weird.
So
Every day is
for
12 hours daylight, 12 hours dark.
for the
Crazy.
listeners at home who don't know, I only know of some of the places you lived, right? So you grew up in Ohio, not tropical. I'm pretty sure you lived in Russia for a while, not tropical,
That
and
is not tropical either. That is true. Yeah.
New York. You've been in New York and you were in the city, and now you're north of the city, and also not
hmm
tropical. So this
Not,
had to
nope,
be
nope.
very different than what you're used to.
It was, yeah. And just in every sense of the word, it was very different. It was definitely an extreme. And I think, I mean, if anybody is out there is listening who's thinking of traveling or even living abroad with their significant other, their spouse, it's like no joke. It's like a real test. It was all training for the pandemic, I swear.
Huh.
Um, yeah, it was a really intense experience together. So we were in a very different place. I mean, it was different for me. I mean, not that I know people that travel more than I do or have traveled more, but I thought, I also lived in Korea for 1 year
Hmm.
teaching. So I thought Korea and Russia, like those are pretty different. But no, Indonesia is way different, way more different. Um, and so in that extreme experience, like the only other person that I was sharing it with was my husband. So we were around each other a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and so
So
back to the question. I don't know if we figured it out. What did Brian end up doing?
right. So he stayed in a lot actually, and for a long time he watched a lot of Netflix.
Okay.
He was watching a lot more than I was able to. Um, towards and I should say like volunteering was not easy. He did start to. He did a like an environmental beach cleanup thing with a group that one of my students was part of. So I kind of helped connect him to that group, and then he went to this beach cleanup thing, and we thought that was the beginning of a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, he was really excited about it actually, and if it weren't for an earthquake, a really big earthquake that
Mm.
kind of ruined everything that semester, he might have continued. But then once that earthquake happened, there was some destruction in parts of the island. Everybody kind of shut down. All the groups stopped meeting. So that was a big disruptor. So after that, it was kind of hard to get connected again.
Oh my gosh.
Um, yeah, I don't know if you knew about that.
I
Yeah, we
didn't
had an
know about
earthquake.
the earthquake. No, I mean I knew you were there when the pandemic hit everybody, but I did not know you were there in an earthquake. If you posted about that on Facebook, somehow I missed that.
I don't remember. I think I might have waited because I didn't want my mom or anybody to freak out right away
Yeah.
or anything. But I'd never had an earthquake before. I never experienced it. Never. It was very funny. Um, and and the hardest part about it actually was just the aftermath of like people freaking out.
Right.
We couldn't do. I mean, like it interrupted the whole semester. Things weren't open. Buildings were. For structural reasons, they were worried about certain buildings, even on campus. And
Hmm.
luckily, the house we were living in was totally fine. Um, so yeah, that was at the very beginning of when we were there, maybe just a couple weeks in that
Welcome to
happened.
Indonesia.
Yeah,
Here's an earthquake. Do you remember what
yeah.
it registered on the Richter scale?
Oh gosh, what was it? I I think it was about a 7. I can't remember now if it was the aftershock that was 6.8 or if the earthquake itself was 6. I think it was like a 7 point something. And then the aftershocks, a couple of them after were really big. I want to say it was 7.2.
And
That's mhm.
did it cause one of those big tidal wave things to come ashore?
That was the fear. And so when it happened, it was about close to 10 in the morning. Was supposed to have gone to a meeting somewhere on campus, but I was running late, thank goodness. And so
Mm.
Brian and I were together in the house. Um, just a funny thing, I thought, because I didn't know what was happening, I could hear it before I could feel it. And
Yeah.
it sounded to me like a giant airplane was about to hit our house. And I was just sort of frozen in place, like, what is happening? Why is this airplane going to hit our house? But then it lasted maybe a minute. Brian knew exactly what was happening. He grabbed me. We stood in a door frame. And then when it was over, we're like, we have to get out of the house. So we went out of the house, but we didn't know what we were doing. So we just kind of stood in front of our house while everyone is running back and forth. And we lived very, very close, like a 5-minute walk to the water's edge, right near a bay.
Yeah, okay.
And so we kind of figured we probably need to move, but we didn't know where to move to. I mean, we barely knew this area. So earthquakes are a great way to meet your neighbors. And our neighbor, who happened to speak English, she came and got us and told us what she was doing, and we all hopped in like her family's minivan. I guess it was her family's minivan, and we drove with them up to this church, like up the hill. That, just in case, because nobody knew at that point, like, if we had to worry about it. Turns out we didn't have to worry about it. There was no tidal wave. They based on every, like where the epicenter was and all this stuff. They realized, okay, there's no threat. But it didn't stop people from freaking out. So that went on for months. A lot of people in certain low-lying villages, they were too scared to ever go back.
Oh, wow.
But we figured we were fine. We felt pretty safe. We had, I had talked to the U.S. Embassy. We'd seen the things, on the, from the Indonesian government. We're like, there's no threat of a tidal wave, so we're going to go back home. But nobody else did. So we lived for a couple days with no one on our street. It was like we were in a little ghost town.
Man.
In Indonesia. So that was, that was that experience.
Is Indonesia a place that experiences earthquakes regularly, or is this not normal for there?
No, this is normal. I mean, relatively speaking, like they've had several big ones on different islands. It's been a while, I think, since there was a big one on the island we were living on. But it's in that ring of fire, and you do get earthquakes.
Yeah.
The sad thing is the buildings aren't necessarily following some kind of like building codes to protect against earthquake damage, and there were in villages there were like lots of destruction, some deaths, it was pretty bad.
That's a bummer. You would think that if they are used to them happening, or if they know that there's a strong chance they're going to happen, that they would really take that seriously, building codes and stuff.
Yeah, you'd think, but I don't know, building codes, I don't think that's a thing that was taken all that seriously. At least where we were, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something that they're working on, I'd like to think.
So that disrupted your first semester, and did you ever feel like you were able to get into a groove teaching and doing your thing there?
Yeah, I started to the second semester. So let's see, that would have been right around right around January. The second semester, I had lots of ideas, getting ready to go in, and I only got started. I think it was the end of January is when things kind of started. And I only got like a month and a week or so, and that's when we found out we were going to have to leave the country. So
was it your choice that you had to leave, or were you being told you had to leave, or and who was telling you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was kind of funny because I say they put us out there. So it's the U.S. embassies that choose where fellows go. So we were basically put out there by the U.S. Embassy, and then we get these messages, or I got the first one, I can't remember when exactly it was maybe that first week of March, and it had words in it that we didn't understand what it meant, like, we strongly encourage you to leave the country as soon as possible. And we're like, well, do we have to or not? Because we have a lot of people here who want us to stick around Indonesia and are not going to understand right now why we're leaving, because nobody was taking it seriously. Nobody was wearing face masks. They thought it was paranoid of me to think that I might be leaving. I tried to kind of give them a heads up, like, hey, this, may have to evacuate. But so it was really tricky at first because they kind of left us to make a decision on our own without really just telling us like, look, you have to leave or what, you know. So, but eventually it was heading in that direction. I
Yeah.
talked to the like, I guess you could call him my boss at the embassy. There's a regional English language office. So I talked to my person there, and he said it's going to become a full-on evacuation. So you might as well just do it now. And they were really worried about us being able to get flights out of Indonesia.
Mm-hmm.
So the sooner we got out, the more relaxed everyone could be. So yeah, I don't
Man.
know if that, did I answer the question?
Yeah. No.
I'm
So
trying to.
it wasn't like Indonesia was kicking you out. It was more like America was saying, "Hey, you should probably leave because everybody's going to be leaving soon."
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And I also think they started to panic I assume they didn't want to be responsible for our health and well-being
Mm-hmm.
if in the middle of a pandemic when we're on an island that didn't have like I wouldn't want to get treated for all range of medical issues on this
Yeah.
rural island, so remote island. So I guess
Maybe.
they kind of wanted, because yeah, better to get back to the States, I guess. But we had no idea what we were going to do when we got back to the States. Like then we would just be problems. So
Would you say
uh,
Indonesia is a third world country or no?
I, yeah, I guess so. It's always such a sensitive question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, um, yeah. But I mean, you wouldn't want to get dental work done there for sure. And there's a lot of countries in Asia that you could get a great dental work done. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
went to the dentist in Thailand, and like that's the place to go, or Vietnam, but not Indonesia. You wouldn't go there.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, Indonesia.
Hey, it's just the facts.
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, so yeah, I would say it kind of is, and you kind of know that when you go there. At least the way it is right now. I mean, again, if you go to Bali, that's a totally different experience than if you go to some of the other places. But
Right. So to get back home wasn't as
hmm
simple as get on a plane and fly to New York. You guys took a very different route to getting home. And I've
well,
seen
yeah.
hundreds of pictures from your trip, what seemed like hundreds of pictures. It seemed like a pretty awesome way to get home. Was it as awesome as it looked in the pictures?
If you're talking about the stateside
Yeah.
part, yes, and yes, it absolutely was. The getting out of Indonesia was just slightly stressful, but it was worth every minute of the stress because of what we were able to pull off after that. But um, yeah, once we got out of Indonesia, which was tricky, it was hard to get a ticket. We really had a couple moments where we thought, like, we're not going to get tickets out of here. Like,
Mm.
just because we had to island hop to get back to Jakarta, the capital, so that we could get an international flight, and things were closing down. Couldn't go to certain countries. You had to follow certain flying rules. But we decided, since well, we didn't have a house to go back to because we had rented it out.
Yeah.
So that was one big thing. Like, well, what's our hurry to get back to New York? We have nowhere to live. And then B, all we knew about the virus is that we should quarantine. We should not go back to our elderly parents at all. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we had wanted to travel, but we weren't going to be able to travel internationally before coming back. So we decided to land in California. Um, we quarantined for 14 days, more or less, thanks to a friend's apartment that she let us have for 1 week, and then an Airbnb another week.
Mm-hmm.
After that we saw my sister, which was great since we'd quarantined. So I saw my sister in Monterey. That was cool.
Oh man.
And then we rented yeah, what do you call it?
Like a Sprinter van?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah, it was a Sprinter van, and we rented it from this company that was they have a location in Boulder and then in Las Vegas. So we rented a car and drove to Las Vegas, picked up this van, and that started like a 10-ish day adventure driving cross country. It was awesome. I highly recommend it. It was the best decision we've ever made.
And you guys like just slept in the van and just saw a bunch of cool stuff.
hmm Yeah, and we had 10 days, and the first night was really the worst night because we didn't really know, we didn't have a clue like where we could go or anything. So we were in like a parking lot of a Love's, like like a gas station
Yeah,
area thing.
truck stop.
Yep, that's the word I couldn't think of. And but then after that, we kind of got our bearings. I mean, it was because that was not fun. It was kind of loud. There were trucks all night. So after that, we kind of figured out where we could go. Brian did all the figuring out where our campsite areas could be because we learned anywhere on BLM land you're allowed to camp. So we would just find these little pull-offs and we'd found the neatest places. And there was really nobody around. And we just parked the car and set up camp and it was great. It was so amazing. We had the best views, amazing stars at night. We'd cook our little meal in the little van. It had a little tiny kitchenette thing.
Mm.
We had to take a big van because we had like four ginormous suitcases that we had from Indonesia. So that
Yeah.
was like the one cumbersome thing is like we had to every night we had to pop up the top of the van and the extra sleeping space was just for our suitcases to be put, but
Yeah.
it was
So
amazing.
BLM
Yeah.
Land, Bureau of Land Management.
Yes.
Cool. I was trying to think what
Yeah.
that was. I was going to ask you, and then it hit me. BLM, Bureau of Land Management. And that's interesting to me because my friend Darren and I are planning, we have a long-term plan to get on motorcycles and drive to Alaska.
Hmm.
And one of the
Oh,
things
wow.
I know, right? We would love to be able to camp, and not, we're fully happy camping in campgrounds, but I gotta think there might be places where we could just camp kind of off the side of the road legally, right? But
Hmm.
it sounds to me like there might be ways to do that. Like, how do you find BLM places where you could maybe do that?
There is an app, and I don't know what it's called, but that my husband put on his phone that basically like had sort of crowdsourced, I think, a lot of the information about like the best places, the where the different BLM like it maybe it showed the map. I'm not sure about where the like the the kind of territory of different BLM land areas were, and it helped him know exactly where we should go. And I let him steer that ship. Like I was happy that he was finding the place every night. So that was what we did most of the time. I don't think we ever used any campground at all. It was just
Hmm.
all of that BLM land that we were able to. There's a lot of it out west, so it was really easy. I could maybe ask him if he's around what that was called.
Yeah, hit me up with that later. I'd be interested in seeing that because that could be really
Yeah.
helpful for us on our trip. So, what was the coolest thing you guys saw when you were driving across country?
What was the coolest thing we saw? I think and I can't remember what it was called. Moki. There's this place I didn't hear about it before. I don't know if you know this. Moki Dugway. Does that sound familiar to you?
I've never heard that
Ever
term.
heard of
No.
it? Okay, it was recommended to me by my boss at Columbia University. She had gone there and she had mentioned like, oh, if you're out west, you should go there. We could go wherever we wanted. We had all the time in the world. Well,
Mm-hmm.
we had 10 days. And it was in the southwest. It was right near like the Valley of Gods. The Valley of the Gods, right? Yeah, that's what it
Yep.
was called. So like above that there's this huge plateau and it's immense and amazing. Like when you can kind of park off to the side and just kind of walk around that area and you see for miles. It was amazing. Moki Dugway was one of the coolest spots that I'd never heard of before.
Moki Dugway.
I
Yeah,
highly recommend.
that'll be.
Yeah.
I'll be googling that later for sure.
Yeah, dude. It's in the Southwest in general is just so amazing, so different, just beautiful. Like the red sand, the red rocks. It's like one of my favorite places, I think.
Yeah.
We fell in love with Utah in general. It was so beautiful.
So when the trip is over, the 10 days, are you back to your house? Are you visiting parents? Is the people that you let live in the house still living there? Like, what happens then?
Yeah, they were there still. We knew they were going to be there still. So we got to live with my parents in Ohio. Well, I lived there the whole summer. Brian lived there, I want to say for a good month and a half, maybe. So we went from Indonesia to traveling across the country to, yes, ending our trip in Ohio and living at my parents. So that was weird and
Yeah,
lovely, but weird.
right. And
Yeah.
so that was mainly the summer, and then you were finally back at your place.
Yeah, I think, let's see, our middle of September is when our lease was up with our tenants. So we got back in and we moved. Yeah, so in September we like officially moved back into our house again. So it's like the second time we've moved into the same house.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so weird when you like I've had moments of deja vu. Like we're back again. A lot of our stuff's put away in the same place that it was back in 2019. And sometimes it feels like I dreamed up the whole thing. Like, did we dream that up? Like, did we really go, bro? And somehow Brian and I share, my husband and I share the dream. Like, both remember the same thing and the same people, and it's really weird. But it doesn't
A
feel real.
shared dream. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to think of it that way.
I am so glad we got to talk about all that because I haven't spoken to you about it at all since, and I think it's incredibly interesting what you did, where you went, as annoying as it must have been to have that cut off early, for you to make that as interesting as possible is pretty awesome. So,
Thanks, RJ. We had a good time. It was so much fun to talk about it, and nice to connect with you too.
so my podcast is called Three Things with JR. And what I normally do on my podcast is I sit down and I write some bullet points, some things I want to talk about. And Three Things is something I was doing it on Facebook years ago.
I remember that.
Right? I had a lot of fun doing it, and somebody's like, you should do that again. And I thought, well, since I can't go out and play music in my band or do comedy or sing in a choir or play softball because of the pandemic, I've always wanted to do a podcast, so let's do it. And that was the concept. So normally I would come up with three things, but since I'm now calling random people and putting them on the spot, it's time for you to come up with three things. But they're easy. They're so easy. Thing number
Okay.
one is just tell me some sort of deep thought you've had recently.
A deep thought I've had recently.
Yeah, it's kind of vague, I know, and it doesn't have to be like super deep and meaningful. It can just be something you thought recently that was kind of deep.
Um, I do tend to brood over things sometimes, so I feel like I have a lot of little thoughts that float around in my head. But I'm gonna go with um, how about this one because it connects with a little bit with the idea of living with your parents when you're a grown adult. But
Mm,
um, there's a Buddhist idea I learned about recently called Shenpa, which is sort of like the things that kind of grab you and make you have a reaction.
yeah.
It's real, man. That having a reaction, like you're an adolescent teenager, it is real. It comes back when you live with your parents. And I've
The act of
noticed
going
that a
back
lot.
home sort of causes you to react, like in what, like in similar ways to how you acted when you were a teenager.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's magical and crazy, and I don't recommend it, but then I do at the same time. You can go back home and you suddenly turn into that moody, grumpy adolescent teenager all over again for a while, and then you can get to know your parents on a new level. It's
And
pretty great.
and what is this called? Shenpa? Do I have that right?
Yeah, Shenpa, it's something that's a term I learned that I thought that captured what I did all summer. Getting getting like attached or hooked to something that's happening and having like a real reaction to it.
Ah, that's good.
Shenpa, Shenpa.
See,
It's good.
you're good at this three things
Am I
thing.
good at this?
Yes, that was incredible. So, thing number two is tell me what's inspiring you right now. And normally I tend to focus on music, books, TV shows, movies, art of some kind. What kind of media are you devouring right now that's kind of, got your juices flowing?
Oh gosh, I just finished Schitt's Creek and that was so good. I mean, all six seasons and the
Ah,
ending like crept up on me. It was so good. Um,
oh, that's
and I
awesome.
Did you watch it? I loved it.
We did. So my sister was telling me I needed to watch it. I watched the first pilot episode years ago when it was just in season 1. And I thought, I don't know, this is for me. It's a little too campy. And so I just shirked it off. I didn't think it was for me. My sister got hooked, and she'd been telling me to watch it ever since. And it was during the final, I guess after the final episode of the final season, my Kiki and I started watching it. And oh my God, it was all we wanted to watch every night. And we can't watch TV every night because of just how busy Kiki is with her horse business and such. So it took us a couple months to actually finish the show. Yeah, but we didn't watch like anything else. It was just Schitt's Creek every chance we had, and yeah, it was so good.
It was so good, and I recently watched the pilot again with my mom actually, because I thought maybe she'd like it, which she did. And I realized just how much the characters develop, like characters that you think could not change in the ways that they do.
Yeah.
They change. And I thought that was incredible and sort of, that's true to life.
Based on the first time I watched the pilot, I was not expecting there to be a story arc like there was, for there to be that kind of, like I wasn't expecting to feel that emotionally attached to these characters who seemed so abhorrent the first couple episodes. And then you realize, no, these are real people and they're in many ways very endearing. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm. You can see a lot of their Shenpa moments too.
Yes. Yeah, pretty much every episode there's some Shenpa going on for sure.
There's a lot. It's all over the place.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. And thing number 3 is just tell me something stupid, something gross, something silly, some funny thing you're thinking, anything at all that's just dumb.
I mean, that's like half of what's going on in my head, like all the time. Okay, well, I mean, I guess it's kind of dumb, but it shows you like where my like anxious mind is sometimes, but it's driving me nuts. I watch a show or I watch even the news or something, especially when I'm watching something, and I have the most mundane thoughts about like who in this scene in this TV show is going to be doing the dishes, because they really should have a conversation about their household responsibilities. Or like the most mundane things when that's not the point of the show or the dialogue or the scene of the movie. But I'm more worried about the household chores. I don't want to be worried about household chores when I'm watching entertainment. But apparently that's what my mind is constantly thinking about.
You're worried about when who's going to do the vacuuming, who's going to do the dishes,
Yeah. Yeah, like for example, in a Schitt's Creek episode, by the way, there was an episode where they went to Jocelyn's house to cook a meal. I think the mother and the son did.
Oh, yes.
And then they left, and all I could think about was, well, wait, did they clean up the mess or did Jocelyn clean up the mess? I need to know who cleaned up the mess.
Yes.
So I don't know what this says about me. It's not that interesting. The first 2 things were much better, but that's what I've noticed recently, that some part of my brain cares about the logistics of like getting the stuff done. So I don't know why.
Does this somehow tie in with Shenpa with your parents in the summer? Because, I've stayed at your parents' house plenty of times, and that place is always like one of the cleanest houses, certainly cleaner than I keep my house for sure. And does it bring you back to that? Like, I have no idea what the regimen was like when you guys were growing up. Who did all the cleaning? Was it mom? Was it dad? Was it the kids? Is it
everybody?
Yeah.
Like it was like But I think actually, this little tendency that I've noticed I have, like my mind can't rest about these silly things even when I'm watching something. I think it's just a product of having grown up in that house where it's like, like we have to know, like dishes have to be done right after dinner. Like why aren't they doing the dishes? And so that's a kind of disturbing.
Those dishes are only going to get harder. The stuff is going to crust on there, and it's going to be, yeah. Whoever's got to do them later is going to pay the price for not doing them now.
You basically just read my mind. Oh,
This is the third one of these conversations I've had, and they just continue to get better every time. This is going to be basically the content of my podcast for as long as I can get people to answer when I call them. Because you're awesome, Sarah. Thank you.
thank you, Jer. I really enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. It was really nice to connect with you again. It's been a long time.
Yeah, and this is just an excuse for me to have a chance to talk to you. I mean, I didn't need one. I could have just called you and not recorded it, but I think the stuff you've gone through in the last year or so, 2 years now, is pretty interesting stuff. So I thought people might like to hear it.
Thanks. Well, I hope it's interesting for whoever listens. And yeah.
And you rocked the 3 things. So there you go.
Thanks.
Yes.
I wanted to do it so well. I'm so glad.
You didn't know you wanted to do 3 things so well until just now, but you did.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know, but it was really important to me that I did it well.
Yeah. So that's it. Thank you again for doing this. Tell Brian I said hey, and I hope we get to see each other again sometime soon.
It sounds good. Yeah. We'll look forward to that whenever it is.
Right on. Love you, Cousin Sarah.
Take care. Love you. Thanks for calling.
All right. That was my time with Cousin Sarah. I hope you found her as engaging and adventurous and interesting as I do. I am jealous of all the traveling and adventures she's done. She's amazing. So that's it for this week's 3 Things with JR. I will be back next week with an interview I recorded with my high school buddy, Chris Iraca, who lives up in Du Bois, Pennsylvania. So what is life like in the middle of Pennsylvania right now? Well, find out next week on 3 Things with JR. Thank you so much for listening. I love you all. Here's a drum solo.